Oh boy, where do I even start? Maybe by wishing you a Happy New Year and happy belated Valentine's Day, and that I apologize for not posting any new video in the last 3 months. The last 3 months, to be honest, have been quite a whirlwind for me, and I just want to give you a really necessary update of what I've been doing in the last couple months and how my life has been so far, and actually where I am right now, because maybe you can see I'm not in Vienna and I'm not in Munich. So right after I posted my last video, I flew to South Africa and I traveled down the garden route with a really dear friend of mine. We drove until the Addo National Park, which is an elephant park, and it was really beautiful. There were so many beautiful places to visit during the garden route, but especially the Addo National Park has been a highlight for me, as it was really beautiful to see like the elephants in their natural habitat with so many like baby elephants playing together. So after the Addo National Park, we drove back to Cape Town. The one good friend of mine had to work, so she flew home, and I stayed for 2 more weeks in Cape Town by myself. And it's really interesting because I always randomly thought that Cape Town or South Africa in general could be a place where I can really see myself living in the future, even though I've never been there and I didn't hear much about it, but it was always like in my heart for years and years. I think since 10 years I'm thinking about like Cape Town as some city where I can initially see myself living in. So I was really interested in how I would actually like the city when I'm there, and I actually did really love it. So it's actually one of the few places I've traveled so far where I can really see myself living in. Like, there are so many amazing places in the world, but in some places you just want to stay for a couple of weeks and you really enjoy it, but you can't really see yourself living in. But in Cape Town, I really had the feeling like I really love it here. I really would love to stay here. So that was my feeling, and it was just amazing, like having so many great adventures with new friends I made, seeing wonderful places in and around Cape Town, and it has been such a refreshing time for me and my soul in general to like be myself again. But during like this time and through a lot of good conversations with friends, I actually realized that I wanted to end my relationship. This maybe seems like a really rushed decision for you guys, but to be really honest, it has been a really long process for me. So I've been thinking about it at least for like 1.5 years. And like being in South Africa on my own has been a last push I needed to actually go through with my decision. I've been with my boyfriend for 5 years, and within the 5 years we've hardly ever been separated for more than 2 weeks. So the rest of the time we've been together like each and every day, 24/7, which is really crazy to even think about. We live together, we often worked side by side, we travel together, so we've been together a lot and our lives have been really intertwined. So at one point I was not even sure who I was without him, as our lives were so intertwined, and I just really needed my own space to find out like who I am as a person again. So being alone in South Africa was really refreshing, and actually was like a fog that lifted in my brain, and like suddenly all the decisions were really clear. But still, it was a really difficult decision to make, as we had a really great relationship. We never had any trust issues. We could do a lot of cool activities together. We were basically like we were best friends, and giving that up is just a really crazy step to do for me. I never had to do that before, so of course it was emotionally really draining. So basically, after making this decision, I had to fly back from South Africa to Vienna, where I actually initially planned to stay with him in his apartment. So I flew back on a night flight. I arrived in the morning in Vienna. I got to his apartment. I broke up with him. I packed as much of my stuff into my car. I luckily had my car in Vienna, so I packed as much of my stuff into the car, and I drove back to Munich the same day to a friend's apartment. I would not recommend that to anybody, as I was obviously emotionally and physically exhausted. I was sleep deprived from my flight, and I actually had a micro sleep on the drive back home, which is really dangerous, and I was actually really upset with myself. So if you find yourself in a similar situation, please just book yourself a freaking hostel and just sleep for one night and then drive back on the next day, because that was not the cleverest decision I did. But yeah, from that day on, I basically was homeless, as I didn't have any apartment anymore, and I basically ended up staying at friends and family's places. I switched almost every week, which was also really exhausting, but I didn't want to be a burden on anybody, while of course still processing like the ending of my really long-term relationship, and everything was just a little too much in my head. We also had like the storage room together, and we packed everything so quickly when we moved out that we didn't really separate it, like the cartons, into what is his stuff and what is my stuff. So during like the time between Christmas and New Year's, I just looked through all of the stuff in the storage room and I separated our stuff. And I also got my own storage room, because the storage room we had was too big for myself and too expensive, to be honest. And I got all of my stuff in this new storage room, and then I had to drive back to Vienna one more time, because I still had a bunch of furniture and a lot of stuff in Vienna still, and he still had a bunch of stuff in the storage room, obviously. So I brought his stuff to Vienna and I took my stuff back home. So yeah, that was my last month, and during all of this crazy whirlwind emotionally and physically, I still had like client projects going on, which I had to manage and juggle, and everything just felt really overwhelming. So I didn't really feel like in a right mental and physical space to actually film any new YouTube videos. I hope you do understand that. Basically, at that point, I was like, I don't have any apartment anymore. I don't have any place to be. I can work from anywhere. So why not go back to Cape Town? Because I really love the city. I really felt like I needed to escape winter in Europe. And I just booked a flight. And in the middle of January, I finally flew back to Cape Town. So I felt really emotionally exhausted when I boarded this plane, and when I landed here in Cape Town, it was like a switch that was flipped, and I felt so much better. There was so much relief, and honestly, like the weather or like the people or like the whole new environment, it has such a great impact on me. What I actually realized since I got here is that this is actually the first time in my adult life that I don't want to be in a relationship right now. Maybe you can relate to this, like in teenage ages, you're seeing all these romantic films and you're like, oh, who's going to be my first boyfriend? And then you have like your first boyfriend, and it's maybe not like the real thing, and then you're like, oh, I really want somebody who loves me as I am. And then you get into like this first real relationship, and it is beautiful, but when it ends, there's like this thing where you step back and like, okay, now I have to work on myself, and I have to find a way how I am good with myself without a relationship before stepping into the next relationship. So that's like the phase I'm in right now. And what I'm planning to do is that I want to date myself. So I want to see myself as a partner and see myself in the good and the bad shapes of a partnership. And I want to do things each day that makes me happy. So I want to buy myself nice flowers, because I hardly ever got nice flowers in my relationship, and no means like to offend my partner, because it was not as important to him as to me. But if I was my own partner, I would give myself flowers. So I buy myself flowers quite regularly. I love to make music. That's why I bought myself a guitar here and I started making music again. And I also love to paint and to draw. and just to spend time with myself and just to reconnect with myself. So in the next video next week, I want to share with you more about how I want to date myself within the next weeks and how I'm gonna proceed with like reconnecting, and also of course like sharing a little bit more about like the projects and the life I've been living here. I'm gonna show you my apartment, which I have in Cape Town recently, and I hope you're excited to follow my journey and see a little bit more about what I'm about to do here. So thank you so much for keeping up with me. I hope this update helped you to understand why I was not really active on here, but I'm really excited to start again and I already feel really refreshed. So I will see you next Thursday with new fresh content.